But we have to be careful, folks, because if we say that it concretely did come out of that lab, we might be shut down by Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the big tech. Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Before we get into our story today, please take a moment right now to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help support the channel, and it also allows us to grow here at the Bald Brad Show, so your help would be greatly appreciated. With that being said, our story of the day is about COVID-19, the Wuhan virus, the Chinese virus, reparations, all the above. It comes from our friends over at the Daily Wire. If you're not already a member, please go over and become a subscriber today. It is written by Ian Hayworth, and he titles it, "Almost 2/3 of Americans think China should pay reparations in lab leak scenario," poll says. Now, Ian is very smart here on how he titled this article because he's talking about a scenario. He's not outright saying that this was developed and created in a lab in China, even though we all probably are on the same page here of it being created and developed in a lab in China. That doesn't mean they purposefully distributed it or got it out there. That's why it's called a lab leak. But we have to be careful, folks, because if we say that it concretely did come out of that lab, we might be shut down by Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the big tech. So we have to say if there's a scenario where it did. But let's be real, folks. It's called the Wuhan virus, the Chinese virus, for a reason. I digress. I'm sure we're all on the same page of what I'm trying to say between the lines. Almost 2/3 of Americans believe that China should be forced to pay reparations for the COVID-19 pandemic if the virus is found to have leaked accidentally from a Chinese lab, according to a new poll. Nearly 2/3 of Americans believe that the Chinese regime should pay reparations for the destruction caused by the human coronavirus pandemic. Well, according to that poll, that number rises from 63 to 78% if investigations reveal that the Chinese government released the SARS-CoV-19 human coronavirus on purpose. Now, it's really hard to show intent. Not only that, but you're dealing with the Chinese government, so it's only going to be that much harder. So was it already initially going to be hard to show intent that they did this on purpose? Yes. Is it going to be even double as hard now that you're dealing with Chinese government? Absolutely. You know, we've all heard of stories that they're not allowing investigators to go in. They're not allowing people to go into the lab to look around. They're not allowing people even to go around the area. All this stuff's happening, so it's going to be almost virtually impossible to show intent as well as purpose that the Chinese government released this thing, not accidentally, but again, purposefully. The center's poll results generally coincide with the number of new Politico Harvard poll, which shows that 52% of the public believes that the virus that causes COVID-19 came from a laboratory leak in China. The center added the Center for Security Policy poll found that 49% believe that the virus was developed in a lab. I would like to think that it might be a little bit more than that. You know, you don't get necessarily cause and effect with polls. It's purely observational. You have certain biases that fall into that poll and the way questions are asked or the way questions are formed. I'm not going to get into the statistical analysis of it, but there are those things that develop in a observational data study. When it comes to an accidental release scenario, 61% of Democrats and 71% of Republicans believe China should pay reparations. In an intentional release scenario, these numbers rose to 73% of Democrats and 88% of Republicans, respectively. Now, I absolutely agree with this, and clearly so do the Democrats. And we kind of figured Democrats would be all about reparations. I mean, hell, they're still about reparations for slavery, which they were against at the beginning when the Republicans tried to initiate the reparations right at the start. Now, this isn't about slavery, and I don't think that we should include slavery reparations today because nobody that was around back then is a detriment or is resulting from slavery back then. Nobody was a slave today. Nobody was a slave back then. You've had multiple generations to climb out of that. It only takes one generation to do so. I digress with that. I'm going to move on here because I'm going to get down a rabbit hole and talk about something that this article isn't even about. It goes on here to say, grouped by location in the accidental release scenario, 66% of those from the Northeast thought China should be forced to pay reparations, compared to 83% in an intentional release scenario. These numbers were 61% and 78% for those in the Midwest, 63% and 74% for those in the South, and 64% and 82% for those in the West. So you kind of get some different graphics going on in different parts of the country. There's various reasons for that. You have religious reasons, you have geographical reasons. all sorts of things, different types of lifestyles being growing up. You have one that may be a tech sector. You might have another one being more of an agriculture sector of the country. So again, there's various reasons and beliefs and cultures, even inside someone's milieu, as to why these numbers would be different. Generally, the numbers increased with age of poll participants. And that makes kind of sense, right? The older you get, the more that frontal lobe develops, the more you're able to reason and have logic behind what you're talking about. But it says for those aged between 18 and 24 years old, 50% believe China should pay pandemic reparations in the accidental release scenario, and 61% in the intentional release scenario. These numbers were 65% and 74% for those aged 25 to 44, 64% and 82% for those that were aged 45 to 64, and 66% and 87% for those aged 65 or older. Now, I would like to see those numbers actually higher, because if a country released a virus that had supposedly, from what the media said, this type of ramifications, you would think that number would be higher. Because if COVID-19 truthfully is responsible for millions upon millions of deaths, then you're talking about a human crisis, a human rights violation here. And I might even be wrong by classifying a human rights violation. There is sure in hell some sort of violation happening with this coronavirus leak that happened possibly from China. The numbers also generally increase with income. Those with under 30,000 of annual income were 61% and 74% in favor of reparations for accidental or intentional release, respectively. And it just goes up from there. There's not a drastic change between 30,000 and 75,000 here. It's about a 10% increase from that pay scale for those that would be in favor of it or against it. The center's poll was conducted by Technometrica between June 30th and July 2nd, 2001, and the nationwide study was a sample of 1,424 Americans 18 or older. That's not a big sample at all, folks. So these numbers could be a lot higher or they could be a lot lower. The more people you're going to sample, the more representative that's going to be of the population. And I'm really surprised that this sample is actually this low here. But, you know, hey, they're getting different geographies around the United States, so it might not be that bad. At least they did a spread of their data rather than keeping it in one sector. Say like California, they're more likely to get some sort of bias just from California. So it seems like they spread it out all over the United States to get something a little bit more representative of the population, which is what we kind of want to see in a small sample such like this. But I hope this sample, or should I say the study, is continually going on. That way we can gather more data and see what the population of America kind of wants in regards to if it is an accidental release, what kind of reparations would you like? If this is a intentional release, which I don't think you're going to ever be able to prove, you know, what would the support be for that as well? I'm all on board for reparations being released from China. I'm surprised the United Nations hasn't talked about this. I'm surprised there hasn't been more pressure on China for us to be able to get more investigators inside there to see what's going on. Not just from an American level. I think this should be a global effort here to crack down on China for, if this is a laboratory leak, to actually, again, get investigators in there to see what's going on. Where's the United Nations on this? It's no surprise they're nowhere to be found, folks. A great book, and I always talk about this on the show if you're a consistent viewer, is Nikki Haley's book. It's titled With All Due Respect. If you want to see how things go on in the UN, more of a behind-the-scenes look on how corrupt it is, go ahead and pick up her book at a local Barnes & Nobles, an Amazon audiobook. You could probably finish it in a weekend. It's a fantastic book. It also gives you a look behind the scenes on Donald Trump, his personality, what he's like, and kind of the freedom he gave Nikki Haley and his other people that were behind the scenes helping him out run the country here. But you have here from the Daily Wire is, should reparations be paid out through if a lab leak scenario were happening intentionally or accidentally? Let me know in the comments what you all think. I want to know if you think that reparations should be paid out from China. If so, how would you distribute that money? Would you have it removed from the debt, or would you have it be distributed to the public? And if you're going to have it distributed to the public, how do you create that calculation? Because everybody's scenario is different on how they were treated. Some people own businesses, some people didn't work. Some people had jobs that they lost. Some people were working but still took a hit on pay. So how would you pay out those ramifications, and how would you do the calculation on that is my question, because I don't know how you would do the calculation on it, which is why I am more inclined to say, hey, why doesn't China remove some of the debt that we owe them? Because that would be more of a structural basis that we all pay into. I understand even then that gets a little bit dicey, and there is differences in tax pay, or at least what the taxpayer's paying in based on income, based on their job, and it goes down the line. I'm not going to get into that because we're at the end of the show here, but thank you so much, folks, for watching this episode. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it. Hopefully you can keep up with my fast talking. Sometimes I'm slower. I try my best to slow it down for those that need it to be slowed down. If you go in the option, I think it does allow you to slow down my speech if I'm going too fast for you folks. Thank you so much for always supporting the Bald Brad Show. I love reading all your comments and having conversations with all of you, and I'll see you next time here on the Bald Brad Show.